You're clean, aren't you? Except for your tower. You're a tower junkie, Roland.
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast devoted to Stephen King and his magnum opus, the Dark Tower series. We discuss the themes, characters, and mythology of the series in Palaver episodes, and review the books and comic series in Kef episodes. We also discuss King novels related to the Dark Tower, non-Tower King novels, TV and film adaptations of King's work, and the latest news about potential Dark Tower-related adaptations. You can find more of our work at TowerJunkiesPod.com and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at TowerJunkiesPod. I am your host, Matt Hurt, and with me today is my commate, Tiny. Tiny, how's it going?
Magnificently.
Perfect. That's awesome. And today on the podcast, we will be doing our first in a series of episodes where we just have a palaver about each member of the quartet in the book series. And so this one's going to start out with, of course, Roland Deschain. But first, we have some news items and some brief check-in stuff to do. First, before we get to news, Tiny, how have you been? What's been going on with you?
I've been good. My knee's killing me. I feel like an old man. Got my marriage license today.
Nice.
Even more of an old man.
Mm-hmm.
And lately I have been reading The Dead Zone.
Nice.
For the second time.
Sweet. And we're going to have an episode about that in the future.
Yep.
How are you liking it? Well, how far are you in it?
I'm halfway through it, and I'm actually reading it in physical form, which is kind of refreshing because I've been solely audiobooking it for like months now.
Right.
So it's just kind of nice to like have that physical thing in there and see your bookmark in there, and I don't know, it's just kind of a nostalgic thing.
Nice.
I'm loving it again. For a while, it was my favorite Stephen King book, and I'm really gonna have to compile my thoughts on the book because I don't know if I can really pin down why I like that book so much.
Oh, really?
I really just dig it. Like, I started reading it less than a week ago, and I'm halfway through it already. So, I mean, it's almost 300 pages I've read already.
Nice.
And it's just because I like it so much. So I'm going to have to really focus.
That's awesome.
But it's been great.
Awesome.
Yeah. Where are you at?
Very cool. Let's see. I finished The Dead Zone a couple weeks ago. I was audiobooking that, and we were talking before we were recording, but James Franco does a fantastic job narrating it. It's really great. And then I also am almost done with Christine
Awesome.
for the first time, which I'm super excited about. It's that's one of those Stephen King blind spots that have been kind of elusive to me because it's always one that I've wanted to read, just never got around to it. So I'm excited to finally be filling that spot in my Stephen King reading. And I'm liking it a lot. I'll talk more about it when we review it. I think I'm going to do a solo review for that, and then we'll come together for the movie review for it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then I've actually done a little bit more Stephen King stuff in the between recordings here. Let's see. I watched Carrie, the Brian De Palma film.
I've still never seen that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
I just never have.
Wow.
I don't know why. No excuses.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
How'd you like it?
Well, it's funny because I didn't like it the first time I saw it. Like, I don't know what it was. It was right after I read the book. It was when I started the blog, Obsessive Viewer, and I was doing the adaptations and remakes where I was like, I'd read the book and then watch the adaptations. I watched the De Palma film. I watched the TV movie, and then all that was to lead up to the 2013 remake. And I haven't read those reviews in a long time, or that review in a long time. But going in just without having the source material like in the back of my head so fresh and everything, it was really good.
Nice.
Like I definitely see why it gets a lot of acclaim, and there's just a really great shot where they're at the prom and they're dancing and the camera's just spinning around and keeps spinning, and it's very disorienting.
I think I've actually seen that before.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Nice.
But yeah, and that's also kind of funny because like I'm reading Christine now, and I'm planning on reading Salem's Lot because a friend of ours, Robin, Alex, and and Jasmine, they started a new book review website, called Another GD Book Site, and they're doing like a horror themed or Halloween themed reading thing. So each week, for the next 6 weeks, they're going to be doing reviews of different books and discussions of different books that are horror related. And this week is Salem's Lot.
Nice.
So, like right now, I'm taking a break from King in the audiobook format because I'm reading like you with the Dead Zone. I'm reading Christine in a physical paperback, and I agree, it feels just really good.
Yeah, it's nice to get
go back to that. Yeah. But like I've been listening to A Game of Thrones. And so, like, now I want to like listen to Salem's Lot immediately. But then I'm also recording a review of The Gunslinger with Tony Schroxel this week. So I want to kind of squeeze in another listen of that. So I don't know. I have all this stuff going on.
I know, right?
But yeah, all that is to say that when we started the podcast and like in the introductory episode that I recorded, I had said that like, oh yeah, we'll be doing like book reviews of Stephen King's books for Merlin's Grapefruit episodes. And like my idea was like, oh, we'll go in like, well, obviously we'll go in like chronological order, but like we're reading like the Dead Zone and Christine and we're kind of jumping all over the place. So
yeah,
and we did it. So I don't know, maybe eventually we'll get into a chronological thing, but I would love to reread Carrie and then have you watch the De Palma film, because I'd be very curious what you would think of that.
Okay, I've never read the book either.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Which, is that his first
That's
novel?
His first one?
That's what I thought. And it's not too long. Is it like 300 pages or
No,
something?
it's not long at all.
Yeah, I need to give that a shot.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I have no excuses. I just never...
Right.
No reasons either why I just never have.
Well, he's written kind of a lot. So.
He has, yeah. I think it's because it's popular.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like a go-to thing. Like, well, yeah, everyone's read Carrie and everyone's seen Carrie. So maybe that's why I just kind of... My partner at work is named Carrie.
Oh, okay.
Same spelling and everything.
Nice.
Anyways,
yeah.
I need to get around to that.
Nice. What are you going to read after the Dead Zone?
I don't know. I think I enjoy audiobooks and everything, and like I have Audible and stuff like that, and so I've been getting Stephen King books that way, but it's kind of expensive. And
it is,
and I'm not like picky about quality of a book. Like it doesn't need to be super nice or anything, and so like I think I'm just gonna peruse around to like the half price books around town and see what they have.
Yeah, if you go to the one in Avon, you might find some of my business cards. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
No, but yeah, that's not a bad idea. They actually have a couple nice hardcovers of Night Shift.
Okay.
But yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah, I might do that.
Nice. Yep. I, on the other hand, have been buying a lot of Audible. Like what I've done is I have a physical Stephen King collection of books that even this week I've added to. Like I bought a what was it? Skeleton Crew. And that's going to be delivered tomorrow. And then I pre-ordered the new edition of Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And then like I'm getting paid on Thursday and I'm like, okay, I have different seasons just in my cart right now. But anyway, having like aside from all that, I've also been buying them on Audible, like using my credits on Stephen King books that I already own the physical copies of and Kindle editions of. Well, right. No, the Kindle editions one I just pay the difference because they have if you have it on Kindle and then go to it on Audible, like it'll show that it's on sale, so it only costs like $8. So I'm like, $9 for Salem's Lot, sure, why not? But anyway, I'm an amazing consumer apparently. But yeah, so after Christine, I don't know what I'm going to read. I'm going to read Salem's Lot, and then I would love to read Carrie soon, and then do that soon. But we'll figure it out.
Okay.
But that is not the only Stephen King thing that I've had going on. I mentioned in a previous episode that there was a local production of an adaptation of The Man Who Loved Flowers from Stephen King's Night Shift short story collection. So for our listeners, we are here in Indianapolis, and Greenfield, Indiana, which is a little ways east of us, there was being shot a short film by the guys over at 5 After 5 Productions. The guy's name is Cameron Grimm. It's one of the Stephen King Dollar Baby projects where he paid $1, got the rights to adapt this work, and then got a crew together, and then he shot this short film. So what I did was I reached out to him, and I actually, he allowed me to go onto the set with them and interview the cast and crew, and just kind of watch as they were shooting the film. And it was a blast, man.
Nice.
It was awesome. First of all, it was filmed in Greenfield, Indiana, which it was on Main Street, and driving onto Main Street in Greenfield, Indiana, it's like I was driving into a Stephen King town.
Yeah, totally.
It is the exact image of a standard Stephen King town, which I think is great, because in the short story, I read it before I went, and in the short story, it's set in New York, and I think Greenfield is a great stand-in for that. And the way that, I won't give anything away, but the way that Cameron adapted it and worked on the story and everything is really quite clever and really pretty amazing.
Nice.
I was talking to him about the process of it, and I'm excited because I'm gonna get to interview him soon, and we'll have a big The Man Who Loved Flowers episode in the coming weeks. But I was really excited about that. I'll put a link to their Facebook page in the show notes. Definitely go ahead and like that Facebook page, because they're awesome. Cameron's a great guy, and the whole cast and crew were phenomenal. And and you'll hear more about them in the coming weeks.
Nice.
And then finally, I was listening to another Stephen King podcast, the Castle Rock TV podcast, and I got to DMing one of the hosts, and we got to talking and stuff, and they actually played our promo on their show this week.
Nice.
And so I was super happy about that. They're great guys, and I just wanted to kind of give a plug to Castle Rock TV podcast. Chris and Skipper from that podcast, they are phenomenal. It's a very well produced show, and they're basically they come from the 11/22/63 an event podcast, where they talked about 11/22/63 and the event series on Hulu. And then when Castle Rock when Castle Rock the show was announced, they started this new podcast. And I'll play a promo from their show later in this episode. But I just want to give a shout out to Castle Rock TV podcast, because they were super nice to play our promo, and I'm hoping that we can get a crossover episode going.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's enough news and check-ins and stuff. I did want to mention, Tiny, that I mentioned before that there's a new Nightmares and Dreamscapes paperback edition coming out. Mm-hmm. And there's something about these freaking paperbacks that are coming out this year. I think they're from Gallery Books, which I think is an imprint of Simon and Schuster. But
okay,
did you see the cover for this?
I didn't see
edition?
the cover. No, let me.
Okay, yeah. It just looks really good. It's like a car on a desolate road.
Oh yeah.
And the color scheme is the road and the car are kind of not sepia tone, but it's red tinted.
Yeah.
And then the sky is blue, and it looks freaking beautiful. And this edition is going to be released, according to Amazon, on October 31st. And I went ahead and pre-ordered that.
Nice.
Oh, and that reminds me that next week, Sleeping Beauties comes out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which I pre-ordered that on Audible, so I'm going to have to listen to that, and then we'll do a review on that. There's so much Stephen King stuff to do.
I know, it's
freaking awesome.
Seems like an endless universe.
It does.
Yeah.
So Okay, so this episode is one of our Palaver episodes. So we have different categories for different episodes. You can find that in the show notes of this episode and also at towerjunkieспod.com/about. So Palaver episodes are just basic conversations about the books and the book series and anything tangentially related to the book series and everything, and to Stephen King as a whole. So I had the idea that we would do these series of episodes all about the quartet at the center of the Dark Tower series. So, of course, to start out, we're going to talk about Roland Deschain, the Last Gunslinger. And so the way we're going to do this is that if you haven't read the book series yet, we won't spoil the series in this first part. We're going to just kind of have a general conversation about the character as a whole, and then we'll have a separate section for spoilers about their arc throughout the entire series of books. So we'll warn you when we go into spoilers, but just on a base level, let's go ahead and talk about Roland Deschain. So, Tiny, what do you think about Roland?
Well, he's I think he is Stephen King's best work. Mm-hmm. He's kind of the quintessential hero, I think. But he has these chips on his shoulders. Mm-hmm. He has very dark aspects of how he conducts himself, I guess I will say, to not get into spoilers.
Right.
He's just a very he's very archetypical in the sense that he's kind of the strong silent type. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he's got this drive. He's consumed by this need, or this it's more than need, it's a destiny that he's linked to, which is, that's an archetypical thing for his kind of character as well. But I feel like there's something special about it because of what Roland is willing to do and what he does throughout his journey, that gets him there. You could almost make the argument that Roland Deschain is an anti-hero sometimes.
Yeah.
So, I think that's what makes him a pretty unique hero. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. And you mentioned him as being kind of an archetypical, like, strong silent type. Like, he is like the archetypical Western character. Mm-hmm. Like the thing that kind of pops up into my head is that he's the man with no name, but he's given a name.
Right.
So like when reading The Gunslinger, he is this kind of mysterious figure. And then as the series progresses, Stephen King kind of peels back the layers of his character and of the backstory. And that kind of really fleshes him out and really makes him one of the most fascinating characters in all of King's work, in my opinion. And it's, like you said, he does have this drive. He has this central purpose that drives him and everything, which I think it's funny because reading Christine, I'm kind of noticing that Stephen King does deal, like, he writes a lot about, like, addiction and everything, and Roland Deschain is a tower junkie. Like, he's addicted to getting to the tower. That is his central drive, and it's something that Stephen King writes about a lot. Like in Christine, like, Arnie is obsessed to the point of having an addiction, and with Roland and the Dark Tower series, it's not just that he's driven by that, because it's a noble quest, because his whole purpose is to go to the tower to preserve his dying world, essentially, because time is, the world has moved on and time is all out of whack and everything is just out of whack and dying, essentially, on his level of the tower. So that's his purpose, is to correct that. But it's this more powerful, like, obsession that really takes away at what would be the heroic aspects of his character, and that's what makes him more of an anti-hero and makes him more of a, not amoral, but more of a complex character than what we would get if he was just a guy that goes into a town and saves some villagers from something and is the hero. And I love the growth of the character throughout the series because, and we'll talk more about that in a spoiler section, but it's almost like the entire series is about him, is a redemptive arc for him, and that he's not necessarily atoning for any sins really, but not necessarily that he's atoning for anything per se, but he is gradually becoming more open to not being so centralized into his quest for the tower, and he becomes less ruthless and more caring. But it's a lot more nuanced than the way that I'm making it sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What else can we say about him?
It's so hard to talk about him without going into spoilers.
It really is.
I think one thing that you have to mention is that I think Roland is also Stephen King's most tragic character. Mm-hmm. His entire life is just riddled with these horrific, I can't go on living things that happen to him. And it doesn't just happen when he's an adult. Like, he has these hardships when he's a kid, mm-hmm. when he's an adolescent. I mean, when he's a father, when he's in love. I mean, it's just all the great moments in his life are bookended by horrific tragedy.
Absolutely.
And I think that is a common thread throughout his life. And I think that's responsible for the way he conducts himself. Like we said, he's mm-hmm. very steely and very distant kind of person. He doesn't crack jokes really, doesn't laugh, doesn't smile.
Very dry
kind of person. Yeah. So I think that explains that, but that's not to say that he's not a layered character.
Right.
I think those moments of tragedy have different effects on him throughout his life. And so he does have layers, but there's a common thread of tragedy throughout mm-hmm. all 7,000 million pages of his life. And I'm not talking about just the books, but his the comic books.
Yeah.
I love the way they delve into his backstory. Mm-hmm. Some of that stuff is gold. I really hope somebody adapts the comics in some way, or
me too.
Hopefully, in a future date when this project is ready to be readapted to film or television, mm-hmm. someone does something with that. I really hope so.
Yeah, I really hope so too.
Yeah. So tragedy plays an integral role in Roland's life.
But is he tragic? Let's see. And I'll dance around this, but are the tragedies of his life because he's being pulled to the tower, or
I think the tragedy is intrinsically linked to his destiny, because you can't be an ultimate savior mm-hmm. without losing a lot of things.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if you're the ultimate savior, if you're going to save the universe, you're going to have someone who is diametrically opposed to that. Mm-hmm. It's classic battle of good and evil. You're going to have someone who's trying to stop you, and that someone or something will always attack what's closest to you, or try mm-hmm. to stop you, not just physically, but emotionally and all that stuff. And so mm-hmm. throughout his life, that force is present that causes a lot of those tragic things to happen.
Yeah.
Roland is definitely the catalyst for some of the tragedy. But a lot of it is the evil forces working against him that just try to trip him up along the way, mm-hmm. As a person. And so I think, if you're going to be that person, if you're going to fill that role, you're going to be linked to tragedy. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. So I think if you're going to create a character like that, it's almost irresponsible to make them a happy-go-lucky or kind of fun character. I don't know about irresponsible, but it's I think it just makes so much sense to have them
be stoic and
go through hardship. And,
yeah,
you know,
it would almost undercut the tragedy and everything if he was an Eddie Dean.
Yes.
If he was quacking. if he was like a Richie Tozier, like cracking wise and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and let's see. I'm thinking of specific examples. I'm definitely going to re-listen to The Gunslinger because it's so damn good. But yeah, it's just he is the heart and soul of the series, obviously. But it's more about his drive is what drives the plot of the series, obviously, and everything. He's a really complex and incredible character.
Absolutely.
In broad terms, what do you think of the arc that he goes through? Like all of the, like not necessarily the little tragedies here and there, but the like little redemptive moments and the things that he does in the series as the series progresses. How do you feel about him as a character?
I like to see the layers of him peeled back through time, because there are moments where there's parts of the story where he's just kind of almost despicable. That's maybe too harsh of a word, but very unlikable, and he does some things that are borderline unforgivable. Able. I kept using that suffix. So I think to see his roller coaster is really fascinating. You know, there's times where it's hard not to get into spoilers with this, but you know, he starts out super hard nosed and just like ruthless. I think his earliest story is just ruthless, and you can go further down the line where he loses people, and it just wrecks him as a person, and he kind of spends time just very lost. There's moments throughout his story where he's just completely lost as a person. And there's moments where he's just he's very very emotional and very I guess the word I would use is fulfilled. The moments where his quartet is very either reunites or they're at their strongest. Yeah, I feel like he has a really strong sense of fulfillment, because obviously the guy is just a born leader, right? And to be leading is also part of his destiny. And so when he's leading, I feel like that's just a fulfilling thing for him. So there are so many ups and downs he goes through, and by the time he gets to the end of his story, he's been through so much that it's almost like getting through a climax of a story is not a big deal for him, because he's just done so much. He's faced the most adversity you could possibly imagine for a character over an unknown amount of time. But that's another thing about his character. Is you can feel the time just time pouring off of him, because it's mentioned how old he is, but you know, you kind of, if you start with the comics and everything and go through his whole life from childhood to the end of the story, it's just been, you just feel it. It feels like it's been centuries. Yeah. And the way that King writes about like Midworld and the way that time is like they can't even keep track of how long days are and everything. You can't perceive it. Yeah. It's just it really goes into just the weight of how much time this character has been around, and how long this quest has been and everything. And there's a lot of like magic and stuff that can really increases that amount for him too. That it makes it just really hard to grasp like the timeline of it, and really it weighs down it puts more pressure on him, and puts a lot of miles on his journey. Right. Yeah, and you mentioned the backstory with the comics and everything, and his backstory as a character. We get quite a bit of that in the Gunslinger as well, in the novel. We get like his rite of passage, and we get a lot of interesting tidbits about his backstory. What's like your favorite part of his backstory? Non-spoiler, I guess. gosh, it's kind of I need to read. I've only read the comics once. There's a story. It's his rite of passage story where it's his process of winning his guns. If you will.
Oh yeah, it's also in the Gunslinger. Yeah,
right. It's depicted in the books, but there's also a comic of it.
Yeah,
and I honestly, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but actually, I think I kind of prefer the comic. I've only read it once. I've read the books twice, so I kind of need to read the comics again to really make a full decision there. But that sticks out. I really just loved the visuals in the comic of that. Like when I think about that story, that aspect of his life, I think about the comics. Those visuals jump out at me. But then also the, again, it's the comics, the Fall of Gilead.
Yes.
Battle of Jericho Hill, kind of fused into one. Just it's hard to explain why I like that so much without going into spoilers. But it's just so finite. It's just such a poignant moment. Like there's the amount of loss, both in the story and through his experience as a character, are just absolutely monumental, and just seems like an insurmountable obstacle to get over as a character, and even for the story, it just seems insurmountable. Yet he persists and he carries on, and he's just the ultimate. He just, he's the embodiment of never quitting.
Right.
And I think that story, the Battle of Jericho Hill and kind of the Fall of Gilead, kind of combined, really drives that home. It's super dark. Yeah. I will say that. It's crazy dark. And it's kind of hard to read in that respect, but, kind of a toss up between those. Yeah. And again, I really wanted to dive into the comics before I saw the movie again, and I kind of lost sight of it, but I've got them at home. I need to sit down and go through them. Yeah.
And we'll get to them eventually on the podcast too, so I'll force you to it.
Absolutely. What about you? What's your kind of favorite?
It's fun. You mentioned the comics, and there's kind of an in between Fall of Gilead and Battle of Jericho Hill. It's technically like basically the first half or the first 2/3 of the Battle of Jericho Hill, where it's just Roland and a quartet of gunslingers that are just like they're young gunslingers, and they're just kind of without spoiling anything, it's like they're like resistance fighters in a war, and it's after their like regime and everything, or their government and the affiliation is toppled, and they're just these resistance fighters that are going after the big bad of the backstory. And I just loved that. And I mean, again, and I've harped on this for the past 2.5 months now, like since the movie came out, prime stuff for like a TV series.
Yeah.
And just like the world building could be so great. It could be great. But anyway, that's probably my favorite element of it, because when I was reading the comics for the first time, I wasn't necessarily expecting that. And it's just, it really expanded upon the character that I knew already and what his backstory was. And also in the Battle of Jericho Hill, the last panel is like, it's so great. Like the last panel is like the perfect, like, end to that arc, and I love it. It almost brought me to tears just reading it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So that'd probably be around my favorite one. I also like the before his coming of age, the stuff with Hax the Cook that's covered in the Gunslinger.
Yeah, that's right.
I like that a lot.
Right.
But yeah. So we can kind of go, I guess, into spoilers for his arc as a character throughout the series and everything. So I'll go ahead and play the Castle Rock TV podcast promo now, and then when we come back, we will talk in more detail about Roland Deschain as a character throughout the Dark Tower series and we will be in spoiler territory. So if you don't want to be spoiled, if you haven't read the books, quit the podcast and come back after you've read it. So here is the promo for Castle Rock TV podcast.
Hey everyone, I'm Christopher DeFilippis.
My name is Skipper Martin.
And you might know us as the hosts of 112263, an event podcast. But Skipper and I are here to announce our new podcast, which will be all about the new Hulu series, Castle Rock. Not only are we going to be covering the TV show, but we're going to be covering the Stephen King books and characters that seem to be somehow tied into the TV show.
Not to mention TV movies and other theatrical movies, even the bad ones. Ugh. But we're going to do it. We're going to do it, right, Chris?
Yep, we're going to do it all. So watch this space, subscribe, and we will be dropping our first episode in no time. It's about a certain murderous clown.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Follow the Castle Rock TV podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at CRTVPod. Visit our website at crtvpodcast.com and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/CRTVPod. The Castle Rock TV podcast is a Fractured Entertainment to Flipside Media production.
All right, and we're back. So we are spoilers on for the character of Roland Deschain and his arc throughout the Dark Tower series. I'm going to kind of throw you a curveball, and one of my favorite moments, or one of the, and this is maybe controversial, but one of my favorite moments is when he speaks to Stephen King. In Song of Susanna, when he and Eddie go out, like, find Stephen King. I loved that element of the story because he's meeting his creator essentially. Mm-hmm. And I just love the way that it plays out. And I like the way that it seemed very therapeutic for Stephen King to write that from what I could read into the text. But I just like the dynamic of him talking to the person that created him. But that's not my favorite part of the entire series and everything. But mm-hmm. How do you feel more specifically about Roland Deschain throughout the series?
That moment in particular that you're talking about, I was so against the meta-ness of Stephen King inserting himself into the story. Mm-hmm. I remember finishing Wolves of the Kala, mm-hmm. and on the last couple pages, it's like they find a Stephen King book, and I'm just like, what? I remember in that moment, I was like, this is where the series is going to lose me. Mm. I was really worried.
Wow.
And I still, having read through it twice, I still don't care for that. I still wish he would never have inserted himself into the story. Mm. I just thought it was odd. I think it provided some juicy parts of the story. Mm-hmm. Most notably, I don't want to throw that spoiler out yet.
Right.
I don't want to throw that spoiler out yet. Okay. But, things happen as a result mm-hmm. of that. And so I think some of there's some pretty juicy nuggets of story as a result of it. So I will give him credit for that. But I didn't care for that whole thing. So it's hard for me to appreciate those moments of the story. But mm-hmm. What jumps out at me as one of my favorite moments is I mentioned earlier when Roland faces court mm-hmm. To win his guns. I forget is there a name for that rite of passage? Do they have a name for it? I don't recall.
I don't know if they have a specific name for the actual.
For
the actual thing, I think it's just winning his guns.
Right. Okay.
His rite of passage.
Or his rite of passage, basically. I remember when I read that, reading about that event, I remember thinking that it was going to be such a big chip on his shoulder because the way it's depicted in the story, it's almost like everyone thinks he kind of cheated a little bit mm-hmm. because he used David the crow or the raven,
hawk, I think.
Hawk, thank you. He used David the Hawk as his weapon of choice against mm-hmm. court, and I think it was almost like it was a cheap thing to do, sort of, and like the reason he did it is because someone else would have chosen a different weapon, and the reason he did that is because he had to win his guns so that he could take revenge mm-hmm. for Martin messing with his mother.
Right.
And so I feel like he almost was treating his rite of passage as like an afterthought. Like, I know that I'm part of the line of Eld. I'm the best in my group of recruits right now, if you will, or trainees. And he's like, I am destined to be a great gunslinger. So this rite of passage is just kind of it's almost like semantics. So let's just get this over with so that I can get on to the work of being a true gunslinger. I saw it as a very arrogant thing, and I don't know if that's what Stephen King intended or what, but that's what kind of jumped out at me. And I feel like I felt like for the rest of his life, people would have looked at him a little bit differently because of the way he chose to address that situation. The fact that he chose the hawk as his weapon and sort of he didn't cheat, but just he kind of took the easy way out to get through that. And then I remember thinking that, man, I wonder if that's going to play throughout the whole story, and if that's going to be something that people come back to. And it really wasn't. I mean, it wasn't, but I just thought it was a cool storytelling tactic. It just really made me think.
Kind of the thing that I think that rite of passage for him, that sets the tone for his actions throughout the series, and his actions from that point in his life onward, because Court asks him, I forget exactly what he says, but he says something like, how did you train him to do that? Like, how did you do it? And then he just says, I didn't train him. I friended him. And David dies going at, like, getting Court, and that's a perfect like microcosm of Roland Deschain as a character. He is someone who sacrifices his friends and his loved ones in service of his goal.
It's a bit of a trend.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he lets Jake fall. Death surrounds him. Like, death, but not for you, Gunslinger. Right. So, like, his friends fall because of of his actions in pursuit of the tower and in pursuit of his goal. It's the same with the backstory in the comics too. Like, everyone dies, but he's fated to stay alive and go on. I loved his backstory that, and this is interesting. In Wizard and Glass, how do you feel about that book overall? We don't need to go in specifics about it, but how do you feel about that book and how it detracts from the journey and does the flashback for Roland's backstory?
I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. I loved it. I flat out loved it. That story, the whole story of his time in Magus, it's just such a great story, and that is a classic Western. I mean, that's like just on the nose Western kind of story, and I'm always a really big fan of when series takes a break from the story or the plot line to just develop a character. Like, I most recently watched Manhunt Unabomber miniseries on Investigation Discovery about the manhunt for the Unabomber. And there's an episode during that series. It's only 8 episodes long, but they took an entire episode just to develop the backstory and focus solely on Ted Kaczynski him as a character. And it was just so absolutely fascinating. And you can use that to really reveal the layers of a character, I think. And I just absolutely, I love it when series do that. And I think I think developing your characters is one of the best things you can do. And so that's what Wizard and Glass is. It's 500, 600, 700 pages of a backstory that describes a lot of who Roland is as a person and his relationship with letting people into his life and falling in love, and he can't be the kind of person that just gets married and has a wife and has kids. Right. Like, that's not part of his destiny, and I think that's revealed really well in that story. You know, that makes him a unique hero because he just...
It sets up his tragedy.
Right, he can't be happy.
Yeah.
He can't be happy, and I think that story really reveals that. Mm-hmm. I loved Wizard in Class.
Me too. And that was the book that really took me probably the longest to read, oddly enough.
Oh, really?
It's like, yeah, because I mean, with reading, I have a habit of just kind of setting a book down for a while and coming back to it.
Uh-huh.
And I did that quite a bit. But I kind of wonder how, because like rereading it, I freaking loved it. Like it is... Like you said, it's a perfect, like, quintessential Western, and it's a love story, and it has all of these moving pieces, and it expands so much on the mythology. And one of the things in the whole series that I wish would be more expanded upon is the whole thing with the good man John Farson, and that whole, like, the fall of the affiliation and everything. And this takes place in a time where that's pending. Like, they're sent to Magus, and they find that, like, they're using that John Farson's using resources and putting things together to mount an offensive on the affiliation. It's like all of this is in the background of this love story of this young gunslinger falling in love with this girl in Magus.
Right.
And we also get the birth of his drive to go toward the tower and to go to the tower with Merlin's grapefruit. And it's just a very deep novel. And then obviously it packs the punch at the end with the reveal of him and Gabrielle Deschain and that whole tragic
as if
thing.
It wasn't tragic enough.
Yeah, I know, right? Just kick the guy when he's down.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's something that I feel like informs the rest of the series in a pretty significant way with his character and his the things that he has to not necessarily let go of, but the things that happens to him in the quartet throughout the rest of the series. Because after that, we get a long wait, and then we get Wolves of the Kala, Song of Susanna, and The Dark Tower. And throughout those books, like at least throughout The Dark Tower, the last book, like he's losing everyone,
right?
In different ways, and throughout the book, and I feel like that's the mark of his characterization and the growth of his character, that he starts out as this loner who's willing to let this kid fall to his death so that he can find the way to the tower and everything. And he's coming from that, and he's ending with this person who's just losing everyone that he loves. That's not necessarily because of his actions, but it's just he's like he put them in the position to get killed and to leave, but he's not letting them fall. He's part of their den, and he's like the quartet functions as it should. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great growth, but we'll talk more about that in detail as we go through the books in our Kef episodes.
Yep.
But
I think we have to mention, or we have to discuss, at least bring up the whole loop thing.
Yes.
You know, that's, to me...
We'll have like a full Palaver episode at some point about that, but yeah.
I mean,
probably.
Since we're talking about his character, I mean, and we're mentioning his tragedy, I'd say, you know, he kind of inadvertently killed his mother.
Right.
The love of his life was burned at the stake in front of his eyes. All of his friends died, with the exception of one or two.
Yeah.
And just,
some of them died multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, he's just, amongst all that horrific tragedy, I think the worst thing is that part of his destiny is he's destined to live it all over in an endless loop. That is just, I mean, like, to wrap your head around that, you just can't, you know? And it's like, in all those horrible things that we read about over 4,000 or 5,000 pages, that's just one loop, and like he's destined to run it forever. And so, like, how bad is it in the other loops? You know, what happens in those other? I mean, I don't even know. Does he kill his dad in another one? Like, what does he accidentally kill his dog? I don't. Like, I mean, it's just like, how bad? It's just crazy what this guy goes through, and just to have it compounded like that.
Yeah, and I love how open to interpretation it is too, because the Horn of Eld, like you can say, well, okay, it's going to be different because now he has the Horn of Eld. Something has changed. Something, I think maybe it's each, like in my perspective is that each loop brings him closer to humanity and closer to being a character that will not lose everything in his pursuit of the tower, or won't put so much importance on the pursuit of the tower in exchange for the lives of his loved ones. But yeah, I honestly, that ending is maybe the best ending I've ever read or ever experienced in any type of media.
It's up there for me.
It is so, because when reading the book series for the first time, like going through it, I was just I had no idea what to expect. Like I had spent 13 months reading the Dark Tower series, and throughout those 13 months, I never really thought about like what's going to happen when he reaches the tower.
Mm-hmm.
Like what is he going to find there? Like what is ultimately at the top of the tower?
Yeah.
I never thought about that. It was always about like the quartet and the world building and everything. And then you had finished the Dark Tower before I did, and like I was just like, when reading the little coda between the ending and the final part of it, where King is basically telling us like, hey, if you don't want to know, just close the book. You never have to know or anything. Like while reading that, I was like thinking like, I don't understand what could I don't know what could possibly be there. Like I don't know how this could end. And then I read it and I was like, I was blown away, because that is just the perfect ending for that character, because he is so consumed by his drive for the tower that, like, of course he's going to have to go back to the beginning and redo it and everything. And I love that in that passage. I love that the voice of Gan is talking to him. The voice of the tower is talking to him and kind of taunting him. And it's just it is magnificent.
Yeah.
And I saw on a post somewhere, I think on Reddit, where someone had said that the stuff in it, the stuff in it in referencing the turtle is the stuff that should have been like what Roland finds at the top of the tower. Like it should have been more of a metaphysical kind of thing. But I disagree, because I think that's just the perfect way to end the journey for that character and restart the journey.
Absolutely.
And then just the most beautiful aspect of that is that it begins and ends with the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. It's amazing. Like I don't know at what point Stephen King decided that was the ending, because he doesn't outline or anything, but I honestly would think that he would, like, I would have to think he was writing toward that from the beginning.
Yeah, me too.
Because it is just so perfect.
Yeah.
And it's so great for the character. Like it is the perfect ending for that character.
Yes. And I agree with you that he had to have had that ending, or at least that conclusion for that character in mind earlier on, because of the mountain of tragedy that he just builds up for that character, and awful things happening, and that's the ultimate one at the end.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's a trend that didn't just develop on its own, I don't think. I'd be curious to pick his brain on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the ending too. I think it's great, and it's just so sad. And It's really a double-edged sword, because with stories that are this epic, like Lord of the Rings or something, you want the characters to be successful, and you want the good guys to win, and everyone's happy in the end. There's a happy ending.
Right.
You want that because it's what those characters deserve. But is that really the most... You're talking about a fictitious story. Is that really the most interesting way you can conclude a story like that?
Yeah.
I don't think it is.
No.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think if the true book had ended with with Roland walking into the tower and calling out the names of his loved ones. That's a great ending, and that's fun, and that's makes you feel good and everything. That's fine, but I don't think we'd be talking about it that much if that was the real ending of that story. You know, that's him walking into the tower is the ending of the story, but the ending for his character is the true ending of the story, I think, and his wrapping that up and having him go back to the beginning, go to the other end of the loop again. It's just. That's interesting as hell. And I mean, that's just such a cool way to end it.
Absolutely. Would it still be your favorite thing if we did get the happy ending where Roland goes to the tower, comes out, and it's like, all right, now I'm going to go to New York with Susanna and Eddie and Jake and live happily ever after?
Honestly, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. I would still love the hell out of it.
Oh yeah.
It'd be one of my favorite books and one of my favorite series, but I don't know if it would be my favorite thing ever. I don't know if I'd want to start a podcast about it.
Right. I
mean, to be honest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's such a perfect way to end it, but but we'll get there. But to kind of wind down, because and we're kind of informal on this podcast here, so to kind of wind down, I do want to mention that we've talked about the ending and everything. I want to go back to the beginning and how the character of Roland is introduced in the Gunslinger, like the Gunslinger itself, and I'll talk in more detail about the Gunslinger when I do a review with Tony of the book, but. I love that almost his introduction, like not necessarily his introduction, because I think it's after. No. When he meets Brown, he goes into the story of Tull, and that what happens in Tull is so brutal and amazing to me. Because that's the introduction to the character is like, he's a gunslinger and the first time we see him use his guns is to massacre an entire town because they're under the influence of a crazy sorcerer. And just the description of it, like there's that picture in the illustrated edition that's just him with rows of dead people, a big line of dead people in front of him on the ground. It's like, that takes such balls to write that as your first introduction to the Gunslinger proper is Tull. It's incredible to me. How did you feel about that when how'd you feel about that in the greater context of his character? I
agree. I think you're not, it's interesting that you're not painting your character in the best of light, your heroic character in the best of light, to open the series. It was a really bold choice. Took balls, like you said. I agree with that. I really don't have much else to say on it other than I think it was a really awesome description. I mean, I think the action descriptors in that part of the book were really cool. I had a really great image of it in my mind, and again, if someone ever turns it into a show or whatever, I would love to see that scene. I think that's going to be like an epic scene. In the series, it's kind of giving me flashes of like the Daredevil series. There's always in each season so far, we've had a big scene where he has to fight a bunch of dudes. Like those scenes are so awesome in that show, and that kind of makes me think of what that conflict in Tull would be like. Something like that.
Absolutely.
So I'm kind of off the rails there, but I agree. I think it's a really bold way to introduce your character to your audience, especially being given that he's a hero. And that's where some of those anti-hero aspects come from. It's like it
just completely disregards the conventional hero and everything in that archetype, and it's just really really fantastic.
Totally.
Anyway, and it kind of sucks because I loaned the Gunslinger and the Drawing of the Three to my friend John, who I work with, and he has been struggling to get into the Gunslinger, and I think I just don't think he's gonna he's not gonna finish it. Like it's just not for him. But like, I think last I checked, he was like almost to that scene. I'm like, just read a little bit more.
Yeah, keep
just
going.
read just a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I don't think you will. But anyway,
I struggled with the Gunslinger the first time I read it. I was like, man, this is really supposed to be like, some of his best work and like his quintessential magnum opus. And I was like, I don't know, this is really weird, and it's just not. It doesn't seem super cohesive and linear, and it's kind of hard to wrap my brain around. So yeah, I think the Gunslinger is the odd man out.
Yeah.
Of the 7 books. So I can understand why people have that reaction to it.
Yeah, that's why I always say it's like the prologue to the series proper.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I think that's about all we have to say about Roland Deschain in this general freeform Palaver episode. We'll continue this series of episodes with an episode devoted to Jake Chambers, and we'll have an episode about. Man, we have so much in the pipeline for this podcast.
We do. Like, I
was thinking about that today. Like, it's a lot, but we're going to do a Dead Zone episode. We're going to obviously do Gerald's Games coming out next week on Netflix, so we'll do that. And we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline. So, so having said all that, is there anything else we should say, or should we?
I don't think so. I think that's
call
about
it a
it.
night.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again to Castle Rock TV Podcast for playing our promo and everything, and check them out and let them know that you heard them here. And if you're here from listening to them, we appreciate you listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. Also, thank you to 5 After 5 Productions and Cameron Grimm for letting me be like a little stalker on the set of his film of The Man Who Loved Flowers. Next time we'll have an episode. I'm not sure what we have in the pipeline for next week. It's all kind of up in the air, but yeah. Final thing. We are a fairly new podcast, and it is definitely helpful for us to get iTunes reviews. So if you just downloaded the new iOS and want to play around with the podcast app, maybe, hit us a rating and review. That would be great. Yeah, so that would be amazing, and you can always contact us at on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and everywhere at Tower Junkies Pod. Having said all that, Tiny, do you have anything else to say?
I don't think so.
All right, well, long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.
Thank you for listening to Tower Junkies, a Dark Tower podcast presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find more of our episodes at TowerJunkiesPod.com, and you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or anywhere else podcasts are found. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can find ways to do that at TowerJunkiesPod.com/donate, or become a patron for Obsessive Viewer at Patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer for recurring donations with different reward tiers. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. Any and all feedback on the podcast is encouraged. You can contact us by emailing us at matt@obsessiveviewer.com, or by tweeting us at TowerJunkiesPod or at ObsessiveViewer and at ObsessiveTiny. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/TowerJunkiesPod. For more podcast content from ObsessiveViewer.com, check out Anthology, my solo side project podcast where I'm reviewing The Twilight Zone as a first-time viewer and exploring other classic and contemporary science fiction anthology television shows. You can find Anthology at anthologypod.com and anywhere podcasts are found. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com and subscribe to the podcast on the app of your choice. Once again, thank you for listening to Tower Junkies, and we'll see you next time.